Good evening and welcome to the EKU Alumni Spotlight Series. My name is Dan McBride. I am the Associate Vice President for Alumni Engagement at EKU, and I will be your host tonight. But before we get to tonight's show, I want to talk a little bit about some things that will be coming up very soon. Our next Alumni Spotlight Series episode will be coming up in March, on March the 9th at 7 p.m. We will have NFL referee Tony Jocelyn as our guest. Tony, an EKU alum, and he'll talk a little bit about his experience in the SEC and eventually in the NFL as a referee, and tell us about how he got there. You always wonder, how does someone become an NFL referee? We'll find out in a couple of weeks when we talk with Tony Jocelyn. I also want to let you know tomorrow night is the next edition of the Colonel's Kitchen. Apologies if you tuned in last week for the show, but because of the bad weather and campus being closed last week, we pushed the show back a week to this Wednesday. So tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, along with the Applied Human Sciences office here on the EKU campus, we will have our Colonel's Kitchen, and it will be featuring a Kentucky hot brown. Chef Sang will show us how to do that. Dana Bush will join me at 8 o'clock tomorrow night right here in this same spot. We hope you will join us for that. But tonight, Alumni Spotlight Series, we are very excited to have a 1988 graduate of Eastern Kentucky University. She got her degree in public relations, and she currently serves as the Associate Director of Communications for the NCAA in Indianapolis. Welcome to the show, Gail Dent. Come on in, Gail.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. How are you?
I am great, and I know we both have been talking the last week or so. We've been snowed in and iced in, but we both finally got some good weather today.
Yes, and it is very nice here in Indianapolis. We had sun today, no snow. It's still on the ground, but it's not coming out of the sky. So, I'd say it was a good day.
Amen to that. We all had enough snow and ice to last us, I think, for the whole winter in the last week.
That's
So,
right. I'm looking forward to spring.
to spring and March Madness is just around the corner. So, that's something to get excited about.
It
Um,
is. Yeah.
Now, so you are originally from Louisville, Kentucky, right?
I am. Yes, from Louisville.
And I understand, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I think I read somewhere that you actually grew up near Muhammad Ali's parents.
Yes, the neighborhood that I grew up in, Muhammad Ali's parents lived down the street, and he had already, moved on. He was older, had moved on, but I can remember as a little girl playing in my driveway with my friends, and sometimes I would see Muhammad's dad driving down the street. And, I remember it to this day. He always blew his horn and waved at us kids. And I thought that was wonderful. My mom actually went to school with his mother. So there was a connection there as well. But yes, Muhammad's parents lived down the street, and another person that also lived down the street was Jimmy Ellis,
Oh,
who
wow.
was, sparred with Muhammad, was a professional fighter as well. He also lived down the street. So it was a pretty interesting neighborhood.
Yeah, sounds like it was pretty safe. You had some tough guys in the neighborhood.
That's right. We sure did.
Now, you're a true Kentucky girl because you have a love of horses, right?
That is very true and still do.
Still to this day. And you wanted to be a vet originally, isn't that right?
I did, as most kids loving animals, while we were young, I thought, okay, I want to be a veterinarian. And then I learned about sports and I said, okay, I think this is the field that I really want to go into. But back to your question, I still love horses. Kentucky is horse country. Uh, I ride horses at least once a week, and
Oh,
I'm
wow.
learning more about the foundation, the things that really, a person needs to know about riding horses. So it's not just the recreational piece of it or the competition, but actually learning how to do horse control and things along that line. So it may not sound like fun. It's a challenge, but I enjoy it. I'm around the horses each week, and it's good for me.
So do you have your own horse or do you ride someone else's horse or
No, I don't have my own horse as of yet, but I have had the same great riding instructor, and she has horses at her farm, and those are the ones that I ride. So they're lesson horses, and you give them commands and keep your fingers crossed that they will follow the command. And it's really fun. It's challenging whenever you're on top of a animal that weighs anywhere from 800 to 1,200 pounds. You better have a free mind, be calm, and try to be in control of that animal. So that's what I'm learning. I'm having a really good time with it. But it does go back to my roots of being, from Louisville and a Kentucky girl. Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned that you found the love of sports, but you didn't play sports, right? You kind of got your love of sports from your mom and dad.
That's true. We were a sports family. Now, I was not a competitive athlete. I was the one who would be running up and down the street. I might get on my bicycle. I take swimming lessons and tennis lessons, but was never a competitive athlete. My dad actually played a lot of tennis. And at one time, way back in his youth, he got the key to Louisville.
Oh,
Yeah, for playing tennis. So he was quite well, did quite well with playing that sport. My mom, she did some recreational type things, and we just had a love for sports, and that's one of the reasons why I believe I got into the industry that I'm in now is from my upbringing around the two of them. Yeah.
but they had a love for sports, and I understand they also had a great put a great deal of importance on education as well.
Without a doubt. My dad went to the University of Louisville and got his master's at University of Chicago, which is a university that's typically in the top 10. In the United States, my mom got her degree at Hampton. So I knew at a young age I was definitely going to college, one way or the other, and get a degree. Was fortunate, blessed to have gone to EKU, got my degree there, and then continued on at University of Kentucky, getting my master's degree there, and just recently earned a certificate. I'm doing a lot with diversity and inclusion from Cornell University.
Oh,
So
wow.
academics is still in my blood.
All right, tell us how a girl from Louisville finds her way to EKU. What was it that brought you to Richmond?
Well, it's an interesting story, and I tell the story to students and student athletes when I talk to them about getting into the industry. Like we were talking about, my family loves sports, and my father tended to watch a little more football than basketball, which may surprise a lot of people with Kentucky being such a basketball state. And on Sundays, that was football day. And he would be in his big chair, and I would have a little chair right beside his chair. And that would be daddy and daughter time. So I knew that I wanted to be in the sports industry. And once I got through high school, I started looking at colleges and looking at who had sport management departments, sport administration departments. And, way back when, they didn't have that many programs. It was
Yeah.
just beginning. And I did a little bit of research and I found this wonderful program at EKU, which was public relations with an emphasis in sports. And I figured this is it right here. It's in my home state. I can save my parents a little bit of money and still get an experience of living away from home. So I made a trip to EKU, loved the campus, loved what I saw, the people that I met, and off I went.
Yeah, and you mentioned the program at EKU. I know there were some particular professors that really had an influence on you while you were in the Department of Mass Communications at EKU.
Yeah, Dr. Cannon was one.
Yeah.
Was fabulous, and it was a great experience. The amount of time that he took to talk to me. Ron Wolf was another individual. I think back on it quite often about the benefit that I truly had at EKU, and the classes were small, which was
Hmm.
wonderful. So you had time to talk to your instructors
Yeah.
and really good instruction on public relations, whether it was journalism or broadcasting, whatever it might be. I look back on that and realize how fortunate I really was. And I'll tell you a quick story. After I graduated from EKU, I was working in Lexington, working at Kentucky. And I was in Applebee's with my mother and my mother's best friend. And Dr. Cannon came in. And this was, this was a number of years after I had left EKU, and he remembered me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really great experience. And it even touched my mother. And she said, wow, that's somebody phenomenal, there. And you must have made some sort of an impression. She said, I hope it was a good one that he remembered you. And I said, yeah, I just remember that. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was a PR major, and I graduated 1 year after you, so we were
I
kind of going through
remember.
the
Yeah.
program at the same time. And I remember the great thing about Dean Cannon is because he had a great way of you learned in his class, but he was
Yes.
also very entertaining. I mean, he always had some bad jokes. He was always funny. His classes were always interesting.
Yeah, like I said, it was a great experience. And, I look at classes now. I also do adjunct teaching. And I remember my days at EKU, and I try to bring a little bit of that into my classes. I don't do as well with the jokes, but, the interaction and the engagement that you have with your students, I think that that's very beneficial. And I always have that open door for them and letting them know, hey, if you have a question, email me here or give me a call here, because that was, if you will, the red carpet, the maroon carpet that was rolled out to me. And I want to reciprocate and do the same thing for students that I come into contact with. Yeah.
Well, and another thing you did when you were a student at Eastern is you got some hands-on experience. I know you got to work with the legend himself, Carl Park, in the sports information office, and
Yes.
got some hands-on experience working with him.
Yes, that was really the start of my career. And again, as I mentioned before, when I go back and I talk to students and student athletes, I will talk about that experience of going to the sports information office and seeing Carl there and asking him, okay, how can I get some experience? I'm getting the classwork, but I realized that I need something on a resume, a little more experience, and went in there and I volunteered, to get some experience. And he really opened the door for me in terms of sitting me down and talking to me about the industry and allowing me to interact way back when with the athletes at EKU and writing about them and interacting with the coaches. I worked specifically with track and field. And, that was a great experience. And it really launched me into what I do today. Also got the opportunity to work with local media,
Yeah.
and the campus newspaper. I remember, the Richmond Register and just that interaction and engagement was extremely beneficial. And if it wasn't for that, and Carl and Jack Frost, I remember Jack.
Hmm.
I may not be where I am right now. So I always like to give kudos to them and, Coach Erdman and, the folks that I worked with. So, yeah, yeah.
Well, and this is what I always tell students when I talk to them. One of the most important things they can do while they're a student is get that experience, even if it
Yes.
is volunteering. Because when you go to a job interview after you get out of school, inevitably you're going to be up against somebody who already has experience. So you need to
Sure.
get that experience while you're in school.
Very true. And that's what we tell our interns at the NCAA. The NCAA has, I think, one of the best internship opportunities for young people. And when I talk again to students and student athletes, especially if they're wanting to go into the communications field or public relations, I tell them, hey, I know that you went to class, You've got a grade. If you're coming to us for an internship opportunity, I'm going to assume that you got good grades, but I need to see something on the resume that shows me that you engaged, that you went
Yeah.
above and beyond. Because that's what I want to see is how you are going to mold into what we're doing at the NCAA in communications. I'm very direct when I talk to students about interns, do internships, do graduate assistantships, volunteer, get that experience. When you walk in the door of a potential job opportunity or internship, people want to see what you've done, and they'll
Yeah.
look at how you can help them as well as allowing them to help you.
Yeah. Okay, we've covered the academics, we've covered the experience part. Let's talk about extracurriculars. You
Ah,
were on the dance team when you were at EKU?
how about that?
That's pretty sweet. I didn't know
It,
you could dance.
you know what? That was one of the really fun experiences that I had at EKU. I didn't know if you remember that, but
Yeah.
it was great. Not only the camaraderie with the other women who were on the team, but also leadership opportunities that gave me. I had at one time people coming to me with sororities, fraternities, different groups about choreographing some different things for them. So again, it was a great leadership opportunity. Also did a couple of years with the EKU Dance Theater. And again, it provided me with confidence being able to perform different types of dances, not only what we would do at halftime, football, basketball games, but different cultural types of dances too. So, yeah, at one point I thought dance was going to be it, but public relations jumped in there, and that was the way I went.
And you spent, did you live in Burnham Hall the entire time you were on campus?
The entire 4 years, yes, I did.
So you were lucky because Burnham was one of because there was it was older, but it was a great location, and it was just people today still want to live in Burnham.
Burnham was great. I made so many friends. In fact, one of my roommates that I had at Burnham, we still communicate to today. And I had a room that faced the ravine. So I could always see people coming and going to classes. It was almost like I was right in the thick of everything, and it was great. Burnham was a very good dorm, and it just, we were pretty close in that dorm and then on my floor. So, yeah, it was a great experience. And, another untold story, my sister went to EKU just for a few years. She lived in Burnham as well.
Oh wow.
So maybe a Burnham Hall family or something. I don't know.
Well, the great news is Burnham's still standing
That's great.
because the progress the last few years, several of the old residence halls are now gone. So at least Burnham is
Yeah,
still there. So you could visit your old rooms sometime.
I might.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about after Eastern. I know you graduate from Eastern, and I think your first job was actually back in Louisville. Is that right?
It was. I worked for Humana in the healthcare industry, and I was still trying to get into sports. And it's an interesting story. I was graduating from EKU, and again, seeing so much of the sport of football, I wanted to go work for the NFL. And I'm sending my resume out to all these teams. I'm getting rejection letters. So I had a friend who I graduated high school with, whose mother was working in PR at Humana. and I said, I'm going to apply for a job there in customer service. And I got the job, was working with doctors and nurses. And more importantly, I was dealing with problems and coming up with solutions. And I didn't know it at that time, but that would be beneficial to me in public relations, dealing with problems, coming up with solutions, and sending people back to do whatever guidance that you had given them. So, yeah, it was an interesting story. Started at Humana, and was lucky enough very shortly after that to get a job in sports.
Yeah, and I think you were at UK and you were there for probably close to 10 years, weren't you?
Yeah, I was at UK for about 10 years. I had only planned to spend maybe about 2 or 3 years. And it was interesting how that came about. As I mentioned, I wanted to get into the NFL and public relations. And I'm sending out all these resumes, and the rejection letters are coming back. One evening, I am sitting at home thumbing through a newspaper, and I see that the NFL had hired a gentleman to look at hiring practices with the league and teams, diversity, inclusion, looking at women being hired, people of color, as well as men, how people were hiring. And I said, I'm going to give him a letter, send him a cold call letter. I did that. He eventually got back to me, and he told me that he didn't have anything for me at the NFL league offices in New York, but there might be something right there within my state. And if I was interested in the position, to resend my resume to him, a cover letter, and he would either endorse me for an interview, or at the time he was at the NFL, Commissioner Roselle was the commissioner. So I said, this would be great. And he did that. And about 2 weeks afterwards, they called me at UK and said that we would love for you to come in and interview. So again, I tell students and student athletes, even on a whim, reach out to people and communicate and let them know what it is that you might want to do, how you might be able to help them. And again, if it had not been for that gentleman who was at the NFL, who did not know me, but took an interest in me, I may not have gotten to Kentucky. And the folks at Kentucky knew Carl. So, they had already checked me out before I got there to interview. So it's a good story, and it works. And, you have to have an open mind and just be flexible. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and Kentucky not only gave you great experience in the SEC, but you got to earn your master's while you were working there,
I
and you
did.
got to work NCAA tournaments and a lot of exciting events.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Like I said, I had only planned to maybe stay there 2 or 3 years, and then, put my foot back in the water for the NFL. And I ended up staying at Kentucky almost 10 years. And it was a fabulous experience. The reason why I stayed is because I was getting good work opportunities, getting great experience, like you said, working with the SEC, working with NCAA, and just meeting key national media members along the way. So it was a great opportunity, and it really opened the door for that next experience, which was the U.S. Olympic Committee.
Yes, and so you didn't go to the NFL next, you go to the U.S. Olympic Committee, and that had to be just a great experience.
That was fabulous. And, I still look back at that as being sort of a once in a lifetime experience, because I was getting good PR experience within the United States, but then also getting international public relations experience. So not only dealing with international media, but also with international athletes and covering them and the cultural experience. That is what I call non-traditional education. Whenever you get to go to these countries and really interact with the natives, as well as getting to attend some games. So it was a once in a lifetime experience actually sitting in the stadium where you have opening ceremonies and things that you've always seen on television. You are actually sitting right there and experiencing that. So, yeah, that was a fabulous experience. And then all of the other international experiences in between with World University Games, Pan Am Games, and again, just the travel and the engagement was fabulous. Yeah.
Well, it's been a difficult year, obviously, for sports in general. But what are your thoughts about being able to pull off the Olympics this year? Do you think they're going to be able to do it?
I think that they will. I think that one thing in sports, it was a gut hit last year when everything had to stop. And it was a hit not only for sports, but the world nationally. And then, it trickles down into sports. Everything stopped. But I think now we have learned how to operate with this pandemic, and you're starting to see sports be more engaged.
Yeah.
We are getting ready to host Final Four. Fingers crossed, both men's and women's, and other championships. You saw the NBA get through its season last year. You saw NFL get through their season. Now, there's still some ups and downs and maybe postponements, but I think the Olympics will watch what others have done, and hopefully, fingers crossed with them, that they will be able to pull it off, this summer. There may not be fans in the stands or as many, so that will be a downside for the athletes because that really pushes them on when they hear that cheering. But you have to realize that a lot of these athletes have trained and trained and trained for so long. They want the opportunity to compete. And again, I think that they will be able to, uh, move forward. It's not going to look like Olympics of past, but hopefully they'll be able, to move forward and get the games through. And then, after summer, they're going to have to turn right around
Yeah.
and do the winter games. So they have a lot on their plate right now. But again, the health and safety of the athletes is right up there at the top.
Absolutely. And so you leave the Olympic Committee and then you go to the NCAA, and you've been there now 20 years, and kind of worked your way up through the ranks.
It's been great. It again has been one of those non-traditional educational type experiences. I had not planned to stay at NCAA very long, but again, the opportunities have been phenomenal. And the people that you network with, the people that you meet, the people that you come into contact with who aren't within the NCAA system. So I've had the opportunity to meet people throughout our NCAA membership, colleges or universities, as well as people who are in professional leagues and who work with the high schools. So it's been really a great opportunity. The travel, again, has been very good, and it has really opened me up to different experiences. People see the competitive side of NCAA, what you see on the Saturdays and, maybe a few other days during the week. They don't see the academic side as much. So in public relations, we get to push that forward and let people see that, as well as the community engagement that student athletes do. And, right now, one of the areas that I work with on a regular basis that has really become my passion is diversity and inclusion. And that is so big right now, not only in our country and the world, but certainly in the sports industry, and not just collegiate, but the professional ranks. So this area, I think, is going to continue to grow. And the engagement right now, the education that we're trying to do with our administrators and our student athletes, it's really powerful, and seeing the changes take place.
You mentioned some of the work that you're doing now, and so I do want to get to some of our viewers' questions because we have some that are coming in. And Steve Greenwell asked a question that kind of relates to that. Would love to hear about a project that you have worked on with the NCAA that was most meaningful.
Oh, the most meaningful project. Wow. There are very, very many projects that are meaningful that touch our championships. I'm going to point out one, though, because I always try to push the diversity and inclusion. And one project that I was involved with from the beginning, and I've been able to see it evolve, is our student athletes did a social media campaign around diversity and inclusion. Oh. And I was able to provide them this past year just with a few tips and ideas that they might want to consider as they move forward. But that is one project that I've really enjoyed being a part of, not only from the publicity side of it, pushing it with, it might be a release or it might be on social media, but looking at these young minds and how they are reshaping the world and reshaping mindsets. That's pretty powerful, because they took this campaign, and it was a 3-day campaign where each day they had a different theme about diversity and inclusion. And we're seeing all different types of athletes, males, females. We're seeing people of all races, different identities. We're seeing international student athletes. We're seeing student athletes with impairments, disabilities. So whenever you can see young people focusing and changing the world and minds, that's pretty powerful. So that one still stands out in my mind. I've had a lot of different projects with championships, and those are fabulous as well. But I really like seeing where our student athletes are going, because they're going to be the future leaders in this world, the next generation. And it's really great to see when they can put ideas together. And I just come in and I publicize, and that's my part.
Another question here. This is from Melissa Hill. She says, what advice would you give to the upcoming class of communications majors 2021?
Oh, wow. I would say, continue what you're doing, persevere. Things are difficult right now, and I've heard from communications majors, we're in a pandemic. Things have changed. What do we do? And I would tell them to stay on course, continue to get that good experience in communications, because that's really what is going to change a lot of what we're in right now. We always hear about technology. We hear about medicine, we hear about other fields, people tend to forget about the power of communications. And right now, what I'm seeing is a prime example of that because we're still in a pandemic. We are socially distanced, but yet we can do things like this. We're still communicating. We're still getting the words out. We're still messaging. We're still broadcasting. We have to do it in a different way, but we're still doing that. So I tell students if they're looking for an area in communications, I'm always going to push PR. So that always pushing that. But if you can do social media, the digital piece of things, that's really making a difference right now. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I would tell them to persevere, be broad in what your skill set is for communications, try to get as much experience over a wide range of things in communications, and that's going to benefit you down the road. Yeah.
Next question comes from a familiar name. Michael Cador wants to
Yeah.
know, how is the diversity and inclusion at the NCAA and how are they seeking to improve it?
Yeah, it's really very good, I think. And I'm not just saying that because, that's my employer. We have had individuals who have worked at corporations, other organizations, then come work at the NCAA and see what our Office of Inclusion is doing. And they even compliment it and say, you know what, you all are doing more things here than what I was seeing done at my past organization. So we always are looking at how to improve, how to get the word out. Again, that communication, what audiences we need to touch in terms of inclusion. And that's the big piece. The diversity is important. We have to understand and acknowledge our differences, but the inclusion piece is even more important because that's when everybody's coming to the table and sharing their ideas. And sometimes people don't understand, the difference between the two, but there are differences. So again, going back to Michael's question, the Office of Inclusion at the NCAA is doing a lot of different activities with a very small staff. So I'll just give you an example. 5 areas that they are touching right now. I told you about the social media campaign. That was one that came through that area. But they have 5 primary areas when you talk about areas that you're looking to improve. One is race. And obviously, just within the last 12 months, the country has really been focused on a lot of things that have happened. Obviously, the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. So race is impacting sports as well. The second, gender and how you can push women forward and making sure that they have the same opportunities as the men and that equality piece. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of Title IX. So there's going to be a lot of discussion around that. Another area that our Office of Inclusion works with that is starting to get a little more attention is the LGBTQ area. And we get a lot of questions at the NCAA around transgender student athletes and working with Congress and, where things are going with state law. So that's another area that's growing. Another area is with student athletes who have disabilities and impairments. And a lot of times people don't realize that we do have student athletes that may not be able to hear, or may have a limb that is gone. So we get a lot of questions about, one day, will there be a championship specifically for them? And, I think about that too, because when I was with the Olympic Committee, I worked with Paralympians as well. And then the fifth area is with international student athletes.
Yeah.
And, every campus has international student athletes, and sometimes they have different needs and their experience is a little bit different. So, as Michael asked, we're working with all of these areas and coming up with a vision, a mission of how we can improve their student athlete experience. And just very quickly, a lot of times people don't realize how diverse the NCAA is as an association. They tend to think very siloed, but we have over 1,200 colleges and universities and athletic conferences and organizations that have different missions and the things that they do. We have colleges and universities that are gender specific, all male, all female. We have military colleges and universities, and we have religious-based colleges and universities. So it's very different. HBCUs, have to remember and mention them. So yeah, we're doing a lot right now on that front, and just trying to communicate more and reach out more to all of the audiences that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I know one of the things that you particularly enjoy is playing the part of a role model or mentoring, because when you were coming up, there weren't that many women of color who worked in sports. And so you didn't necessarily have that many people for that opportunity. And so now you can provide that opportunity to younger folks who are coming up.
And Dan, I do look at that and I feel like that is something that I have to do. I was always taught to reach back, reach to the side, and, push forward. So I do look at myself as being a female African American who needs to help bring others into the industry, bring others into the world of sport. And, we're dealing with the same thing on the public relations side. So I try to be a role model there as well. And I jokingly tell people, if, there's anybody who's a golf fan, I'm at the point where I'm on the back nine right now. I'm looking for, everybody else to push them along. So, everything that I do right now, like that back nine, your shot, everything makes a difference right now. So I try to be that role model and always have that open door or open email to where, if people have questions, I want to get those questions answered, because somebody did that for me as we started on this show, talking about the experiences that I had at EKU. And, I think that's the service that we have to have once we get to this point in our life and this point in our careers. We have to open that door and be willing to answer those questions that people have.
Speaking of which, we have one final question from a viewer tonight
Okay.
that I want to make sure we get in. How do you keep diversity and inclusion messaging fresh?
Yeah, that's a very good question on the D&I side. And you always have to communicate, I think, with your audiences, because people think, okay, I have diversity and inclusion messaging, and if it's this way today, it's going to be that same way next week or next month. And that's not the case. We are seeing times change, things evolving very quickly. So, one thing that I do is I keep open communication with a lot of different people. And I try to think of ideas. Okay, if we did it this way and we messaged something, we talked about an issue this way, let's talk about it from a different perspective, or maybe have a different person talk about it to bring their perspective to the forefront. I also look at different ways with my statements. If I talked about something and I pushed a goal or a particular message, let me kind of backtrack and delve into it a little bit deeper. So I'm still keeping the goal in sight, but maybe I'm talking more about the tactical side of it, and just giving a different perspective. So I think, one, you have to keep communication open with individuals because people think differently. And I think that you have to look at your messaging and look at different ways to present it. I might present it verbally, like this. I might tweet something out on my NCAA Twitter account at NCAA Gail. I might do it differently that way. We might do a podcast. So again, different platforms. And when you have different platforms, you're going to communicate a little bit differently. So yeah, I always try to come up with different brainstorming and messages and ways to keep that messaging consistent and concise, but freshen it up a little bit.
Obviously, a great piece of advice. We appreciate the questions from the audience. Gail, we appreciate your time. I'm looking at the clock and we're getting close to wrapping things up.
Okay.
And I know you and I could probably talk for another hour and a half about this stuff. But in the interest of time, thank you for being with us tonight. I know that your EKU experience sets you up very nicely for what's been a great career.
It's been fabulous. And again, Dan, thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Again, EKU was my start. That was the foundation. And I will give the university and the people that I interacted with the credit from this day now going forward. And again, thank you very much. I've had a great time, and thank you for the questions. Hello to everybody, and everybody stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, well, you have made us proud here at EKU with a great career. So Gail Dent, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. That is Gail Dent, the NCAA Associate Director of Communications, and we thank her for being our guest tonight, 1988 graduate of EKU with that degree in public relations. I want to remind you again, our next Alumni Spotlight Series show comes up on March the 9th. March the 9th at 7 p.m., we will have Tony Jocelyn, NFL referee. He will be my guest that night. He's an EKU alum, and he'll talk about his experience as a referee in the NFL. A little bit sooner than that, coming up tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, it's the next edition of the Colonel's Kitchen, as we will be preparing a Kentucky hot brown with Chef Sang, Dana Bush, and myself. Join us tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. We hope you will be here for that. Until then, and until the next Alumni Spotlight, I'm Dan McBride from the Campus Beautiful saying so long.